Belize is a country on the eastern coast of Central America. It is the only country in Central America whose official language is English, though Belizean Creole and Spanish are also commonly spoken. Belize is bordered on the north by Mexico, on the south and west by Guatemala, and on the east by the Caribbean Sea. Its mainland is about 290 kilometers long and 110 kilometers wide, with 22,800 square kilometers of land and, as of 2014 update, a population of 340,844. Belize has the lowest population density in Central America. The country's population growth rate of 1.97% per year is the second highest in the region and one of the highest in the Western Hemisphere. Belize's abundance of terrestrial and marine species and its diversity of ecosystems give it a key place in the globally significant Mesoamerican biological corridor. Belize has a diverse society, composed of many cultures and languages that reflect its rich history. Originally part of the British Empire, it shares a common colonial history with other Anglophone Caribbean countries. From 1862 to 1973, the area went by the name of British Honduras. It became an independent Commonwealth realm in 1981, retaining Queen Elizabeth II as head of state. Belize is considered a Central American and Caribbean nation with strong ties to both the Latin American and Caribbean regions. It is a member of the Caribbean Community, the Community of Latin American and Caribbean States, and the Central American Integration System, the only country to hold full membership in all three regional organizations. Belize is known for its September celebrations, its extensive coral reefs, and punta music. Etymology. The origin of the name Belize is unclear, but the earliest record of the name is found in the journal of the Dominican priest Fray José Delgado, dating to 1677. Delgado recorded the names of three major rivers that he crossed while traveling north along the Caribbean coast: Rio Soite, Rio Zibam, and Rio Belize. These names, which correspond to the City River, Sabine River, and Belize River, were provided to Delgado by his translator. It is likely that Delgado's Belize was actually the Mayan word Belix, meaning muddy-watered. Others have suggested that the name is derived from a Spanish pronunciation of the name of the Scottish buccaneer Peter Wallace, which was applied to an early settlement at the mouth of the Belize River, although there is no proof that Wallace actually settled in the area, and some have characterized this claim as a myth. Several other possible etymologies have been suggested by writers and historians, including French and African origins. History. Early history. The Maya civilization emerged at least 3 millennia ago in the lowland area of the Yucatan Peninsula and the highlands to the south, in what is now southeastern Mexico, Belize, Guatemala, and western Honduras. Many aspects of this culture persist in the area despite nearly 500 years of European domination. Prior to about 2500 BC, some hunting and foraging bands settled in small farming villages. They later domesticated crops such as corn, beans, squash, and chili peppers. A profusion of languages and subcultures developed within the Maya core culture. Between about 2500 BC and 250 AD, the basic institutions of Maya civilization emerged. The peak of this civilization occurred during the Classic period, which began about 250 AD. Maya civilization. The Maya civilization spread across what is now Belize around 1500 BC, and flourished there until about 900 AD. The recorded history of the middle and southern regions is dominated by Caracol, an urban political center that may have supported over 140,000 people. North of the Maya Mountains, the most important political center was Lamani. In the late Classic era of Maya civilization, as many as 1 million people may have lived in the area that is now Belize. When Spanish explorers arrived in the 16th century, the area that is now Belize included 3 distinct Maya territories: Chetumal Province, which encompassed the area around Corozal Bay, de Zulu and Eco Province, which encompassed the area between the New River and the Sabine River, west to Tipu, and a southern territory controlled by the Mancha Cholmaya, encompassing the area between the Monkey River and the Saskatoon River. Conquest and early colonial period. Spanish conquistadors explored the land and declared it a Spanish colony but chose not to settle because of its lack of resources like gold and the strong defense of the Yucatan by the Mayans. English and Scottish settlers and pirates known as the Baymen entered the area in the 17th and 18th centuries respectively and established a logwood trade colony, slave economy and port in what became the Belize district. Baymen first settled on the coast of what is now Belize in 1638, seeking a sheltered region from which they could attack Spanish ships. The settlers turned to cutting logwood during the 18th century, establishing a system of slave labor using black slaves. The wood yielded a fixing agent for clothing dyes that was vital to the European wool industry. The Spanish granted the British settlers the right to occupy the area and cut logwood in exchange for an end to piracy. The British first appointed a superintendent over the Belize area in 1786. Before then the British government had not recognized the settlement as a colony for fear of provoking a Spanish attack. The delay in government oversight allowed the settlers to establish their own laws and forms of government. During this period, a few wealthy settlers gained control of the local legislature, known as the public meeting, as well as of most of the settlement's land and timber. The Battle of St. George's Cay was a 1798 military engagement off the coast of Belize between a Spanish invading force from what would become Mexico, attempting to capture the Baymen-controlled territory for Spain from a small force of Baymen and their black slaves. Spain's last attempt occurred on September 10, 1798, when the Baymen and their black slaves repelled the Spanish fleet in a short engagement with no known casualties on either side. The anniversary of the battle is a national holiday in Belize and is celebrated by some Belizeans to commemorate the first Belizeans and the defense of their territory. As part of the British Empire in the early 19th century, the British sought greater control over the settlers, threatening to suspend the public meeting unless it observed the government's instructions to eliminate slavery outright. Slavery was abolished in the British Empire in 1833, but this did little to change working conditions for labourers in the Belize settlement. Slaves of the colony were valued for their potentially superior abilities in the work of mahogany extraction. As a result, former slave owners in British Honduras earned £53.69 on average per slave, the highest amount paid in any British territory. Soon after, a series of institutions were put in place to ensure the continued presence of a viable labour force. Some of these greatly restricted the ability of individuals to obtain land. In a debt peonage system to organize the newly freed, the position of being extra special mahogany and logwood cutters undergirded the early descriptions of the capacities of people of African descent in the colony. Because a small elite controlled the settlement's land and commerce, former slaves had no choice but to continue to work in timber cutting. In 1836, after the emancipation of Central America from Spanish rule, the British claimed the right to administer the region. In 1862, Great Britain formally declared it a British Crown colony, subordinate to Jamaica, and named it British Honduras. As a colony, Belize began to attract British investors. Among the British firms that dominated the colony in the late 19th century was the Belize Estate and Produce Company, which eventually acquired half of all the privately held land in the colony. Belize Estate's influence accounts in part for the colony's reliance on the mahogany trade throughout the rest of the 19th century and the first half of the 20th century. The Great Depression of the 1930s caused a near collapse of the colony's economy as British demand for timber plummeted. The effects of widespread unemployment were worsened by a devastating hurricane that struck the colony in 1931. Perceptions of the government's relief effort as inadequate were aggravated by its refusal to legalize labor unions or introduce a minimum wage. Economic conditions improved during World War II as many Belizean men entered the armed forces or otherwise contributed to the war effort. Following the war, the colony's economy stagnated because of the pressures caused by the war's spending. Britain's decision to devalue the British Honduras dollar in 1949 worsened economic conditions and led to the creation of the People's Committee, which demanded independence. The People's Committee's successor, the People's United Party, sought constitutional reforms that expanded voting rights to all adults. The first election under universal suffrage was held in 1954 and was decisively won by the PUP, beginning a three-decade period in which the PUP dominated the country's politics. Pro-independence activist George Cadell Price became PUP leader in 1956 and the effective head of government in 1961, a post he would hold under various titles until 1984. Under a new constitution, Britain granted British Honduras self-government in 1964. On June 1, 1973, British Honduras was officially renamed Belize. Progress toward independence, however, was hampered by a Guatemalan claim to sovereignty over Belizean territory. Belize was granted independence on September 21, 1981, and about 1,500 British troops remained in Belize, in order to provide protection from a Guatemalan threat. To forestall any possible incursions, the British had previously stationed a detachment of Royal Air Force VTOL Hawker Siddeley Harriers in the territory in 1975, and again in 1977, as a deterrent. Guatemala refused to recognize the new nation, because of its long-standing territorial dispute with the British, until 1991. With Price at the helm, the PUP won all national elections until 1984. In that election, the first national election after independence, the PUP was defeated by the United Democratic Party. UDP leader Manuel Esquivel replaced Price as prime minister, with Price himself unexpectedly losing his own House seat to a UDP challenger. The PUP under Price returned to power after elections in 1989. Guatemalan President Jorge Serrano Elias formally recognized Belize's independence in 1991. The following year, the United Kingdom announced that it would end its military involvement in Belize, and the RAF Harrier detachment was withdrawn the same year, having remained stationed in the country continuously since its deployment had become permanent there in 1980. British soldiers were withdrawn in 1994. But the United Kingdom left behind a military training unit to assist with the newly created Belize Defence Force. The UDP regained power in the 1993 national election, and Esquivel became prime minister for a second time. Soon afterwards, Esquivel announced the suspension of a pact reached with Guatemala during Price's tenure, claiming Price had made too many concessions to gain Guatemalan recognition. The pact may have curtailed the 130-year-old border dispute between the two countries. Border tensions continued into the early 2000s, although the two countries cooperated in other areas. The PUP won a landslide victory in the 1998 national elections, and PUP leader Said Musa was sworn in as prime minister. In the 2003 elections, the PUP maintained its majority, and Musa continued as prime minister. He pledged to improve conditions in the underdeveloped and largely inaccessible southern part of Belize. In 2005, Belize was the site of unrest caused by discontent with the PUP government, including tax increases in the national budget. On February 8, 2008, Dean Barrow was sworn in as Prime Minister after his UDP won a landslide victory in general elections. Barrow and the UDP were re-elected in 2012 with a considerably smaller majority. Throughout Belize's history, Guatemala has claimed ownership of all or part of Belizean territory. This claim is occasionally reflected in maps showing Belize as Guatemala's 23rd department. As of June 2015, the border dispute with Guatemala remains unresolved and quite contentious. Guatemala's claim to Belizean territory rests, in part, on Clause 7 of the Anglo-Guatemalan Treaty of 1859, which obligated the British to build a road between Belize City and Guatemala. At various times the issue has required mediation by the United Kingdom, Caribbean Community Heads of Government, the Organization of American States, Mexico, and the United States. Notably, both Guatemala and Belize participate in confidence-building measures approved by the OAS such as the Guatemala-Belize Language Exchange Project. Government and politics. Belize is a parliamentary constitutional monarchy. The structure of government is based on the British parliamentary system, and the legal system is modelled on the common law of England. The symbolic head of state is Queen Elizabeth II, who holds the title Queen of Belize. The Queen resides in the United Kingdom, and is represented in Belize by the Governor-General. Executive authority is exercised by the Cabinet, which advises the Governor-General and is led by the Prime Minister of Belize, who is head of government. Cabinet ministers are members of the majority political party in Parliament and usually hold elected seats within it concurrent with their cabinet positions. The bicameral National Assembly of Belize is composed of a House of Representatives and a Senate. The 31 members of the House are popularly elected to a maximum 5-year term and introduce legislation affecting the development of Belize. The Governor-General appoints the 12 members of the Senate, with the Senate President selected by the members. The Senate is responsible for debating and approving bills passed by the House. Legislative power is vested in both the government and the Parliament of Belize. Constitutional safeguards include freedom of speech, press, worship, movement, and association. The judiciary is independent of the executive and the legislature. Members of the independent judiciary are appointed. The judicial system includes local magistrates grouped under the Magistrates' Court, which hears less serious cases. The Supreme Court hears murder and similarly serious cases, and the Court of Appeal hears appeals from convicted individuals seeking to have their sentences overturned. Defendants may, under certain circumstances, appeal their cases to the Caribbean Court of Justice. Political culture. Since 1974, the party system in Belize has been dominated by the center-left People's United Party and the center-right United Democratic Party. Although there have been other small parties that have participated at all levels of elections in the past, though none of these small political parties have ever won any significant number of seats or officers, their challenge has been growing over the years. Foreign relations. Belize is a full participating member of the United Nations, Commonwealth of Nations, Organization of American States, Central American Integration System, Caribbean Community, CARICOM, Single Market and Economy, Association of Caribbean States, and the Caribbean Court of Justice, which currently pertains only to Barbados, Belize and Guyana. In 2001, the Caribbean Community Heads of Government voted on a measure declaring that the region should work towards replacing the UK's Judicial Committee of the Privy Council with the Caribbean Court of Justice. It is still in the process of acceding to CARICOM and CICA treaties, including trade and single market treaties. Belize is an original member of the World Trade Organization, and participates actively in its work. The pact involves the Caribbean Forum subgroup of the Group of African, Caribbean, and Pacific States, CARIFORUM, presently the only part of the wider ACP bloc that has concluded the full regional trade pact with the European Union. Armed Forces. The Belize Defense Force serves as the country's military and is responsible for protecting the sovereignty of Belize. The BDF, with the Belize National Coast Guard and the Immigration Department, is a department of the Ministry of Defense on Immigration. In 1997 the regular army numbered over 900, the Reserve Army 381, the Air Wing 45 and the Maritime Wing 36, amounting to an overall strength of approximately 1,400. In 2005, the Maritime Wing became part of the Belizean Coast Guard. In 2012, the Belizean government spent about $17 million on the military, constituting 1.08% of the country's gross domestic product. During the 1980s, this included a battalion and No. 1417 Flight RAF of Harriers. The main British force left in 1994, 3 years after Guatemala recognized Belizean independence. But the United Kingdom maintained a training presence via the British Army Training and Support Unit Belize and 25 Flight AAC until 2011 when the last British forces left Ladyville Barracks. With the exception of seconded advisors, administrative divisions, Belize is divided into 6 districts, shown below with their capital cities and populations at the 2010 census. These districts are further divided into 31 constituencies. Local government in Belize comprises 4 types of local authorities: city councils, town councils, village councils and community councils. The 2 city councils and 7 town councils cover the urban population of the country, while village and community councils cover the rural population.